Have you ever had that heavy moment when someone asks something of you, and without even pausing, the word yes slips out of your mouth? Your voice says yes, but inside, something feels tight. Your shoulders tense, your stomach knots, and deep down you know you've just agreed to something that doesn't feel right for you. Maybe it's not even something huge. It could be a small favor, another task on an already full plate, an invitation you don't really have the energy for. But even if it seems small, the weight of that yes feels big. It lingers. You replay it later and think, why did I agree to that when I really wanted to say no? This is something so many of us experience, especially those of us who feel deeply and care deeply. We don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. We don't want to be thought of as difficult. We want to be kind, thoughtful, dependable. And so we give, we bend, we stretch ourselves thin, and we call it being a good person. But after a while, something begins to shift inside. We feel tired more often. We start resenting the very people we're trying to please. We feel invisible, not because others don't care, but because we've hidden our own needs away. I want to pause here and acknowledge something important. There is nothing wrong with caring for others. There is nothing wrong with wanting to be kind and generous. Those are beautiful qualities. But there's a quiet truth many of us overlook. When kindness always comes at the expense of our own peace, it stops being kindness. It becomes self-neglect. And over time, self-neglect chips away at our joy. It drains our energy. It leaves us feeling hollow and disconnected from the person we want to be. So many of us carry guilt around the idea of boundaries. The very thought of saying no can make us uneasy. We wonder, will they think I don't care? Will they be upset with me? Will they pull away? These questions echo in our minds until the guilt feels heavier than the choice itself. But here's the truth I want you to hear and hold close today. Boundaries are not barriers. They are not punishments. They are not about rejection. Boundaries are about clarity. They are about saying, this is who I am, this is what I need, this is what I can give without losing myself. When you think of boundaries this way, they become something softer and more loving. They are not walls that separate us. They are gentle lines that help protect the garden of our well-being. Imagine a garden with no fence at all. Anyone can walk through it, pick at it, trample over it, and before long, the flowers begin to wither. But when you add a simple, respectful fence, the garden thrives. The flowers grow taller, the colors grow brighter. The beauty of that garden is still there for others to enjoy, but it is also protected. That's what boundaries do for your life. I want you to really let that image settle in, because the truth is, you deserve to be cared for too. Your peace is not something small or optional. It is the foundation of everything you bring into the world. When you are rested, when you are centered, when you feel safe within your own limits, you show up with more clarity, more kindness, and more genuine presence. But when you're stretched too thin, when you've said yes too many times out of guilt or obligation, what you bring into the world is exhaustion, frustration, and resentment. So today we're going to gently explore how to set boundaries without guilt. We'll talk about why boundaries matter, why guilt shows up, the signs that your boundaries might need strengthening, and most importantly, practical ways to begin honoring your needs without apology. Think of this as a conversation, a chance to breathe deeply, to reflect, and to remind yourself that your voice, your needs, and your peace are just as important as anyone else's. This isn't about cutting yourself off from others. It isn't about being harsh or unkind. It's about learning how to take care of yourself so that you can move through life with more ease, more balance, and more authenticity. It's about finding the courage to say, I matter too. So if you've ever carried guilt for saying no, if you've ever felt torn between caring for others and caring for yourself, I invite you to stay with me here. Together, we'll discover how boundaries can become less of a burden and more of a gift of self-respect, a gift of peace, and a gift of living in alignment with who you truly are. Chapter 1. Why Boundaries Matter. Let's begin by asking a simple but powerful question. Why do boundaries matter? Why are they such an essential part of protecting our peace, especially for those of us who feel life deeply and carry a tender sensitivity toward the world around us? At first, boundaries can sound harsh. The word itself can bring up images of walls, fences, or barriers that push people away. And if you are someone who values connection, compassion, and closeness, the idea of building walls can feel uncomfortable. But boundaries are not walls. They are not about keeping people out. Boundaries are about creating healthy space where you can truly be yourself. Think for a moment about your personal energy, your time, and your emotional well-being as if they were a kind of inner home. Just like a home has doors and windows, your inner life needs openings that allow connection, but it also needs walls that provide shelter. Without those walls, your home wouldn't feel safe. Without some form of protection, everything inside would be vulnerable to whatever comes along. In the same way, boundaries are what keep your inner home steady, secure, and respected. They don't stop connection. They make connection possible because they allow you to give and share from a place of strength rather than depletion. When we don't have boundaries, the result is often subtle at first. We overextend ourselves a little. We say yes when we're already tired. We agree to something small even though we'd rather rest. In the moment, it might not seem like much, but over time, those small moments build up. Suddenly, our days feel crowded with obligations. Our energy feels constantly drained. We may even start to feel a quiet resentment creeping in, even toward people or situations we genuinely care about. This resentment doesn't mean we don't love or value others. It means we've crossed our own invisible lines without realizing it. On the other hand, when boundaries are present, something beautiful happens. We begin to feel grounded. We know where we end and where the world begins. We know what we can give, and we know what we need to hold back in order to stay whole. Boundaries provide clarity, and clarity is freeing. It helps us move through life with less confusion, less resentment, and more ease. When we are clear about our limits, we're no longer torn between saying yes when we mean no, or pretending to feel okay when we're not. Boundaries help us show up honestly. There's also a quiet strength in boundaries. Think about a tree with deep roots. The roots don't make the tree less generous. The tree still offers shade, beauty, and oxygen, but the roots give it stability. Without roots, the tree would topple in the first strong wind. Boundaries are like those roots. They keep us steady when life gets noisy. They allow us to bend and adapt without breaking, and just as a tree doesn't apologize for having roots, we don't need to apologize for having boundaries. They are part of what keeps us standing tall. Boundaries matter because they prevent burnout. When you honor your limits, you protect your energy so that when you do say yes, you mean it wholeheartedly. Boundaries matter because they create respect. When others see you honoring your needs, they learn how to interact with you in healthier ways. And most importantly, boundaries matter because they are an expression of self-respect. They are your way of saying, I value myself. My well-being is important. I deserve to move through life with peace. I want you to notice something important here. Boundaries are not just about saying no to others. They are also about saying yes to yourself. Yes to rest when you need it. Yes to stillness when you crave it. Yes to the quiet activities that nourish you. Boundaries give you permission to choose what truly matters instead of being pulled in every direction. And here's a gentle truth. When you care for yourself through boundaries, you actually have more to give to others. Your presence becomes more genuine. Your energy becomes more focused. Instead of showing up exhausted or half-hearted, you show up with authenticity and clarity. This is why boundaries are not selfish. They are generous because they allow you to give from a place that is real and sustainable. So why do boundaries matter? Because without them, we lose touch with ourselves. With them, we create space to breathe, to rest, to restore, and to thrive. Boundaries are not the end of connection. They are the foundation that makes true, healthy connection possible. And perhaps most importantly, they are a way of saying to yourself every single day, I matter, my peace matters, and my needs deserve to be honored. Chapter 2. The Guilt Problem. Now that we've talked about why boundaries matter, let's spend some time with the part that so often gets in the way, guilt. For many of us, guilt is the single heaviest reason boundaries feel so hard. It's not that we don't know how to say no. It's that when we try, guilt rises up inside us like a wave. It makes us second-guess ourselves. It makes us wonder if we're being unfair. It whispers that by choosing our own needs, we're somehow letting someone down. Where does this guilt come from? Sometimes it begins very early. Many of us grew up learning that being good meant keeping others happy. We were praised when we shared, when we gave up our turn, when we helped without complaint. And there's nothing wrong with generosity. But when generosity becomes tied to our sense of worth, we begin to believe that our value comes only from what we can give away. Saying no then feels like betraying the very identity we've been carrying for so long. For others, guilt shows up because we confuse kindness with self-sacrifice. We believe that if we are truly kind, we should always make space for others, even when it costs us our own well-being. And so when we set a limit, it feels like we're breaking an unspoken rule. That kindness means endless availability. But that's not what kindness really is. True kindness has room for honesty. True kindness doesn't require you to deplete yourself. In fact, when we give at the expense of our own peace, what we offer is no longer kindness at all. It becomes obligation. And obligation over time feels heavy for both us and the people around us. Guilt also has a way of showing up because we're deeply sensitive to other people's reactions. The moment someone sighs or hesitates or looks disappointed, our hearts sink. We imagine stories in our heads about what they must be thinking. They're upset, they're hurt, they're judging me. And before we even know if that's true, guilt has already settled in. This is the trap so many sensitive souls fall into. We're not only responding to what others say, but to what we imagine they might feel. We're carrying emotions that may not even belong to us. So here's the gentle truth we need to remember. Guilt is not always an accurate measure of right and wrong. Guilt is simply a signal that we're stepping outside of old patterns. When you've spent years saying yes to keep others comfortable, of course it feels strange to say no. Of course guilt shows up. But that doesn't mean you've done something wrong. It means you're learning something new. Guilt is often just the echo of old conditioning, not a reflection of your true values. Think about it this way. If you were to begin exercising a new muscle, you'd feel sore at first. The soreness isn't a sign that you're harming yourself. It's a sign that you're strengthening something that hasn't been used before. In the same way, guilt is like emotional soreness. It shows up because you're practicing a new muscle called self-respect. Over time, that soreness fades, and what's left is strength. There's another layer here, too. Guilt sometimes convinces us that boundaries will make us less loving, that if we say no, people will think we don't care. But what actually happens is the opposite. When we honor our boundaries, we remove the quiet resentment that builds when we overextend ourselves. Instead of offering half-hearted yeses, we begin to offer wholehearted ones. Instead of being stretched thin, we show up more present and more genuine. Boundaries make our yeses more meaningful because they come from a place of choice, not obligation. I want to invite you to pause and reflect on this for a moment. Can you think of a time when you said yes out of guilt and later felt resentful or drained? And now, can you imagine how that same moment might have felt if you had said no, gently but firmly, honoring your true needs? Wouldn't that no have been more honest? Wouldn't that no have created more space for you to offer your yes when it truly mattered? This is why it's so important to recognize the role of guilt. It tries to keep us small, silent, and agreeable. But what it's really doing is protecting an outdated version of ourselves, one that believed our worth came only from pleasing others. Today, we get to rewrite that story. We get to remind ourselves that our worth is not dependent on how much we give away. Our worth is not measured by how agreeable we are. Our worth is already here, steady and whole, with or without anyone else's approval. So the next time guilt shows up when you set a boundary, notice it, acknowledge it. But don't let it control you. See it for what it is, a leftover voice from the past. And then gently remind yourself of the truth. Saying no doesn't make you unkind. Saying no doesn't make you selfish. Saying no simply makes you authentic. And authenticity is the greatest gift you can bring into any space. Chapter 3. Signs you need stronger boundaries. Now that we've begun to understand why boundaries matter and how guilt often clouds the process, let's take a gentle look at the signs that boundaries in your life might be weaker than you realize. Sometimes we don't even notice that our peace is slipping away. Life becomes a little heavier, a little more crowded, and we chalk it up to stress, or to being busy, or to circumstances we can't control. But often, what's really happening is that our boundaries are being stretched too thin. And if we're not paying attention, that stretching slowly turns into exhaustion. One of the clearest signs is that you find yourself feeling drained after certain interactions or commitments. Picture this. You spend time in a situation, and instead of leaving feeling fulfilled or balanced, you walk away feeling empty, tired, or even a little resentful. That's your inner self telling you something important. It's saying that somewhere a line has been crossed. Maybe you gave more energy than you had. Maybe you agreed to something you didn't truly want to do. When you leave more depleted than you arrived, that's a strong signal that a boundary is missing. Another sign is that you often say yes when you really mean no. This yes usually comes quickly, almost automatically, before you've even had time to check in with yourself. And later, when you're alone, the weight of regret sets in. You replay the moment in your head, wondering why you didn't speak up, promising yourself that next time will be different. But when the next time comes, the same automatic yes slips out. This cycle leaves you feeling powerless, like your voice has been muted by habit. That repetition is not a flaw in you. It's simply a pattern that has not yet been broken, and patterns, thankfully, can always be changed. A third sign shows up in the form of quiet resentment. Resentment is like a shadow that follows us when we ignore our own needs. It doesn't always roar loudly. Sometimes it's subtle. A small tightening in the chest, an irritated thought, a heaviness in the body. You may notice yourself feeling frustrated, not necessarily because of the person or the situation itself, but because deep down you know you didn't honor your truth. Resentment is a whisper from your inner self saying, "Pay attention, something here is not working for you." Another powerful sign is neglecting your own needs, especially in small, everyday ways. Perhaps you skip rest because someone else's request feels more urgent. Perhaps you put aside an activity that brings you joy because it feels less important than pleasing others. Perhaps you regularly push through fatigue, telling yourself you'll recharge later, but later never comes. Over time, these small sacrifices add up, and you start to feel disconnected from the things that make you feel alive. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just an ongoing sense that your life doesn't quite belong to you anymore, that you're running on autopilot, serving everyone else while leaving yourself behind. Another sign, and one that is easy to overlook, is when you constantly explain or justify your decisions. If you feel the need to provide long explanations every time you decline something, it might mean you're struggling to trust that your needs are valid on their own. You might say, "I can't do this because I have so much going on, because I'm tired, because of this and that." In reality, you don't owe long explanations for taking care of yourself. A simple, honest statement is enough. If you notice yourself over-explaining, it may be because a boundary feels shaky inside you, and you're trying to convince both yourself and others that it's okay to hold it. Another sign is that you feel anxious about disappointing others. You may notice that before you even respond to a request, your mind starts running through what the other person might think. Will they be upset? Will they judge me? Will they pull away? That anxiety keeps you tied to their imagined reactions instead of staying connected to your own truth. When the fear of disappointing others has more power over you than your need for rest, balance, or authenticity, it's a sign that your boundaries need strengthening. And finally, there's the feeling of being stretched too thin, of living in a state of constant overwhelm. It might feel as though your days are never truly your own, that you're always rushing, always giving, always behind. There's little time left for reflection, for creativity, for stillness, for the simple things that restore you. When life feels like an endless list of obligations, it's not because you're failing. It's because your boundaries are asking to be reestablished. I want to pause here and say this gently. If you see yourself in these signs, it doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. It doesn't mean you're weak or flawed. It simply means you've been conditioned to put yourself last, and you're beginning to notice the cost of that habit. Noticing is the first step to change. Awareness is powerful. Once you recognize the signs, you can begin to take small, steady steps toward creating boundaries that honor who you are and what you need. So, if you often feel drained, if you say yes when you want to say no, if you carry quiet resentment, if you neglect your needs, if you over-explain, if you feel anxious about disappointing others, or if life feels like it's pulling you in too many directions at once, these are all gentle signals. They are your inner voice saying, it's time. It's time to care for yourself. It's time to draw lines that protect your peace. It's time to remember that your needs matter as much as anyone else's. Chapter 4. How to Set Boundaries in 8 Practical Steps. We've spent time exploring why boundaries matter and how guilt often clouds the process. We've also looked at the signs that may be quietly telling you it's time to strengthen your limits. Now, let's move into the heart of it all. How to actually begin setting boundaries in a way that feels natural, kind, and sustainable. It's easy to talk about boundaries in theory, but living them in everyday life is where the real change happens. And the truth is, boundaries don't need to be complicated or dramatic. They don't require confrontation or conflict. Boundaries are built through small, steady practices. Step by step, you learn how to honor your needs while still moving through the world with gentleness and respect. Let's take this slowly together. The first step is clarity. Before you can set a boundary, you need to know what it is you truly need. This requires honest reflection. Ask yourself, what leaves me feeling drained? What situations leave me feeling uneasy or resentful? Where in my life do I notice myself saying yes when I want to say no? On the other side, what restores me? What activities, spaces, or rhythms bring me peace? Boundaries grow out of this self-awareness. Without clarity, boundaries can feel vague, but when you know your own needs, it becomes much easier to voice them. The second step is to practice using simple and kind language. Many people imagine boundaries as long explanations or complicated justifications, but they don't need to be. A short, calm statement is enough. You might say, I can't stay late today, or I need some quiet time this weekend, or simply, that doesn't work for me. Notice how these statements are direct, but also gentle. They don't blame, they don't attack, they just express your truth clearly. It may feel uncomfortable at first, but the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. The third step is to expect pushback. This part is important. When you begin setting boundaries, some people may test them, not because they want to harm you, but because they're used to a certain pattern. If you've always been available, it may feel surprising to them when you suddenly say no. They may question you, they may push a little, or they may express disappointment. This is normal. It doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. It simply means others are adjusting to the new clarity you're creating. If you can stay steady and kind during this stage, people will learn to respect your limits over time. The fourth step is to start small. You don't need to transform every area of your life all at once. Choose one small boundary to begin with. It might be giving yourself an extra half hour of rest in the morning. It might be politely declining one invitation this week. It might be turning off your phone during dinner so you can enjoy your meal in peace. These may sound small, but they are powerful. Each small act of honoring yourself builds confidence. Over time, you'll feel stronger and more comfortable setting boundaries in bigger areas of your life. The fifth step is to remember that boundaries are not only for your benefit, they also benefit others. When you hold clear boundaries, you create more authentic interactions. People don't have to guess where you stand. They don't have to wonder what you're truly feeling. Boundaries remove confusion and create healthier connections because everyone knows what is welcome and what is not. In this way, boundaries are a form of kindness because they bring clarity and honesty into your interactions. The sixth step is to pair boundaries with consistency. It's not enough to set a limit once. You need to hold it steady. For example, if you decide that you will not take calls after a certain hour because you need rest, it's important to honor that limit consistently. If you bend the rule often, others won't know if your boundary is firm or flexible, and you'll find yourself right back in the same patterns. Consistency teaches both you and others that your boundaries are real, not just ideas. The seventh step is to release the need for approval. One of the hardest parts of boundary setting is the fear of how others will react. But the truth is, you cannot control other people's feelings. You can only control your own choices. When you honor your limits, some people may be disappointed, but disappointment is not the same as harm. It's simply a natural reaction to change. Allow others to feel what they feel while you stay rooted in your own peace. Over time, the people who truly value you will come to respect and even appreciate your honesty. And the eighth step, perhaps the most important of all, is to practice self-compassion. Setting boundaries is not something you will do perfectly. There will be moments when you slip, when you say yes out of habit, when you feel guilty and retreat. That's part of the journey. Instead of criticizing yourself, remind yourself that this is a skill you're learning. Each attempt, even the imperfect ones, is a step forward. Treat yourself with the same kindness you would offer a close friend who is learning something new. If you can begin with these steps, clarity, simple language, expecting pushback, starting small, remembering the benefits, staying consistent, releasing the need for approval, and practicing self-compassion, you will slowly begin to feel stronger in your boundaries. You will feel less guilt, less resentment, and more calm. And most importantly, you'll begin to notice that your life feels more balanced, more peaceful, and more authentically yours. Remember, boundaries are not about shutting the world out. They are about protecting the space that allows you to thrive. They are about choosing peace over people-pleasing, clarity over confusion, authenticity over obligation. And when you take even one small step toward honoring your boundaries, you're choosing to respect yourself in a way that transforms everything around you. Chapter 5. Releasing the guilt. We've spent time exploring why boundaries matter, how guilt shows up, and how to begin practicing small steps to protect your peace. But now comes perhaps the most tender part of the journey, learning how to release the guilt that so often clings to us when we begin to honor our own needs. For many of us, guilt doesn't just whisper, it weighs us down. You finally say no to something, and then almost instantly the voice in your mind begins to argue with you. You hear thoughts like, maybe I was too harsh. Maybe they'll think less of me. Maybe I should have just pushed through. Even though the decision was right for you, the guilt makes you feel as though you've done something wrong. It lingers in your chest, in your stomach, in your thoughts long after the moment has passed. This is where we need to pause and remember something important. Guilt is not always a sign that you've made a mistake. Sometimes guilt is just a signal that you are stepping outside of an old habit. It is your nervous system saying, this feels unfamiliar. And unfamiliar doesn't mean wrong. It simply means new. Think about the first time you tried to learn something new, whether it was riding a bike, learning a language, or practicing a skill you had never tried before. At first, it felt awkward. You probably stumbled, wobbled, or felt clumsy. But over time, it became natural. Setting boundaries and releasing guilt work in exactly the same way. The discomfort is not proof that you've failed. It's proof that you're growing. One of the most powerful ways to release guilt is to reframe it. Instead of saying to yourself, I let someone down, try saying, I honored myself. Notice how different that feels. The first statement is heavy. It places all the focus on others and suggests you've caused harm. The second statement is lighter. It affirms that you acted in alignment with your own needs. And here's the truth. Honoring yourself is never a betrayal. It is an act of respect, and it creates a stronger foundation for everything else in your life. Another way to soften guilt is to replace it with gratitude. Each time you set a boundary, take a quiet moment to thank yourself. You might say, thank you for protecting my peace. Thank you for choosing rest. Thank you for respecting my energy. Gratitude shifts the focus from what you fear you've taken away to what you've actually given yourself. Over time, this practice rewires the way you experience boundaries. Instead of associating them with guilt, you begin to associate them with care, strength, and relief. Visualization can also be powerful here. Imagine your boundaries not as sharp edges that push others away, but as soft lines that create balance. Picture them as gentle circles of light around you, protecting your space while still allowing connection. When you hold this image, it's easier to see your boundaries as an act of love, not just for yourself, but for the quality of your interactions with others. When you're rested and peaceful, you bring more kindness, patience, and presence into every part of your life. Affirmations can also help retrain the mind when guilt creeps in. Simple phrases repeated often can begin to change the way you respond. You might tell yourself, my needs matter too. It is safe for me to say no. Protecting my peace allows me to show up more fully in the world. Boundaries are healthy, and I am allowed to have them. At first, these words may feel unfamiliar, even awkward, but with repetition, they start to sink in. They become new truths that replace the old stories guilt tries to tell. It's also important to remind yourself that disappointment is not the same as harm. When you set a boundary, someone might feel disappointed. That's natural. But disappointment passes. It's simply a normal reaction to change. It is not your responsibility to prevent others from ever feeling it. What matters is that you are acting from a place of honesty and care. Trying to erase every possible trace of disappointment from others only leaves you carrying the weight of the world, and no one can carry that forever. Another gentle way to ease guilt is through reflection. After you set a boundary, notice how you feel, not in the moment of saying it, but afterward. At first, guilt may rise quickly, but give yourself time. Check in later. Do you also feel lighter? Do you feel a sense of relief? Do you notice more space opening up in your day, in your heart, in your mind? Often, beneath the guilt, there is a quiet feeling of peace, and that peace is the truest sign that you've done what's right for you. Remember, too, that guilt often fades with practice. The first few times you hold a boundary, the guilt may feel loud and heavy, but over time, as you continue to choose yourself, it begins to soften. What once felt impossible starts to feel natural. Eventually, you may look back and wonder why it ever felt so difficult. Most of all, be gentle with yourself in this process. Releasing guilt is not about forcing yourself to never feel it again. It's about learning to see it differently. Instead of treating guilt as proof you failed, treat it as a reminder that you're learning something new. Thank the guilt for showing you that you're stretching beyond old patterns, and then let it pass. When you begin to approach guilt this way, it loses its power. It no longer holds you back from protecting your peace. Instead, it becomes a signal that growth is happening, that you are honoring yourself in ways you may have never dared to before. So the next time guilt shows up, pause, breathe, and remind yourself, my needs matter too. Saying no is not a rejection of others. It is a declaration of care for myself. And when I care for myself, I create more space for joy, more space for peace, and more space for the life I truly want to live. Chapter 6. Encouragement and Empowerment. At this point, we've talked about so many layers of boundaries, why they matter, how guilt tries to hold us back, the signs that show when they're needed, and the practical steps for creating them. We've even explored how to gently release the guilt that comes along for the ride. Now it's time to turn towards something even more important, encouragement. Because the truth is, this journey isn't always easy. It can stir up old habits, old fears, and old stories about who we believe we need to be for others. But here's what I want to remind you of with all the gentleness and strength I can offer. You are capable of this. You are stronger than you think. And every small step you take toward honoring your own needs is already a victory. You may still feel uncertain. You may still wonder if it's selfish to draw these lines, if it's unkind to put yourself first. But I want you to hear this clearly. It is not selfish to care for yourself. It is not unkind to honor your limits. In fact, it is one of the most generous things you could do. Because when you are rested, balanced, and at peace, you bring your best self to the world. You show up more present, more grounded, and more authentic. The people around you don't just get pieces of you, they get the real you. I know that as a sensitive soul, the weight of other people's expectations can feel heavy. You may have spent years, even decades, shaping yourself to fit the needs of others. But here's the truth. You were never meant to disappear in order to make others comfortable. You were meant to exist fully, to breathe fully, to live in a way that reflects who you truly are. Boundaries are not about becoming harder or colder. They're about allowing yourself to exist in your wholeness without apology. It's also important to remember that boundaries are not a one-time act. They are a practice. There will be days when you hold them firmly and feel proud of yourself. There will be other days when you slip, when you say yes out of old habit, when you fall back into people-pleasing. And that's okay. It doesn't erase your progress. Growth is not about perfection. Growth is about returning to yourself again and again with compassion. Each time you catch yourself and choose differently, you are rewriting the story of your life. Here's something else I want you to know. You do not have to set every boundary all at once. Sometimes the most empowering thing you can do is to choose just one small limit that feels manageable. Maybe it's giving yourself an evening to rest without filling it with tasks. Maybe it's saying no to one invitation this week. Maybe it's pausing before you respond to requests, giving yourself time to check in with your heart. These small steps add up. They build trust within yourself. They prove to you that you are capable of honoring your needs. And with every step, your confidence grows. There may be moments when others don't understand. There may be moments when someone looks surprised or even disappointed. But that does not mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're changing. And change, by its very nature, feels unfamiliar to the people around us. Hold steady, stay kind, but stay firm. In time, the people who truly respect you will adjust. And those who don't, well, their reaction is not yours to carry. One of the most empowering truths about boundaries is that they allow you to move through life with less resentment and more choice. Instead of being pulled in every direction by the needs of others, you become the steady center of your own life. You decide where your energy goes. You decide what matters most. You decide when to give and when to rest. And that kind of empowerment is not only freeing, it's transformative. I want you to hear this next part as if I'm speaking directly to your heart. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to choose yourself, not once in a while, but every single day. Your needs are not a burden. Your peace is not negotiable. And the more you believe this, the more your life will begin to reflect it. So let this be your encouragement today. You don't need to be perfect at boundaries. You only need to be willing to try. Choose one small step this week, one small way of honoring yourself. And when guilt shows up, remind yourself that it's simply part of the process. You are unlearning old patterns and creating new ones that will support you for years to come. This journey isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more of yourself. It's about creating the space you need to breathe, to rest, to thrive, and to live with peace. And that is something you deserve. Not someday in the future, not when everyone else is satisfied, but right now, exactly as you are. As we come to the close of this conversation, I want to invite you to pause for just a moment. Take a breath wherever you are right now. Feel the air moving in and out of your body. Notice how even this simple act of breathing creates a kind of boundary, a gentle rhythm that reminds you there is an inside and an outside, a space that belongs only to you. That's the essence of what we've been talking about all along. Boundaries are not about shutting the world out. They are about creating enough space for you to breathe, to feel, to live as your truest self. Throughout this journey, we've explored the reasons why boundaries matter, the guilt that can hold us back, the signs that reveal when our limits are being stretched too thin, and the steps we can take to create more peace in our lives. We've reminded ourselves that guilt does not always mean wrong. It often just means new. And we've talked about the courage it takes to honor yourself, even when it feels unfamiliar or uncertain. But here's what I hope you carry with you most of all. Setting boundaries is an act of self-respect, and self-respect is one of the deepest forms of peace you can give yourself. Every time you choose to protect your well-being, you are telling yourself, I matter. My life matters. My needs matter. That is not selfish. That is truth. I also want you to remember that this journey is not linear. There will be days when you hold your boundaries firmly, and you feel proud of how far you've come. And there will be days when you slip back into old patterns, saying yes when you mean no, stretching yourself too thin. On those days, I hope you'll be gentle with yourself. Progress is not about never stumbling. Progress is about noticing when you stumble and choosing with kindness to try again. This is not about perfection. This is about practice. And with each practice, you grow steadier. With each step, you become more confident. Over time, what once felt heavy with guilt will begin to feel lighter, and what once felt impossible will begin to feel natural. So as you move forward from here, I encourage you to carry a few simple truths with you. You are allowed to rest. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to take up space. Your energy is precious. Your peace is sacred, and your needs are worth honoring, not someday, but now. Not only when it's convenient for others, but always. If you remember nothing else from this conversation, I hope you remember this. Boundaries are not a rejection of others. They are an embrace of yourself. They are the quiet declaration that your life has value and that you're worthy. Thank you so much for being here. If these reflections spoke to you, I'd love for you to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so we can keep walking this path together. Until next time, take good care of yourself and keep choosing what brings you peace. Thanks for watching.